Hello, everyone. This is Whitney Well from Star Hearth Astrology, and today I'm here to talk about Mercury's retrogrades for 2022. So, I will also be releasing these as separate little lectures. So if you'd rather have them kind of closer to the dates, you can just wait for those. But for those of you who, like me, maybe have heavy Virgo or heavy Aquarius in your chart and like to know the details and prepare and kind of plan out time, this one is for you. I think it's fascinating to look at something like Mercury's retrogrades that happen at least 3 a year. This is one of the weird years where we get 4 because one of them gets clipped into next year. And kind of look for a larger story arc in them. One of the interesting facets of Mercury's retrogrades is that we will see them in the same elements. So this year is kind of a borderland year where we have all 3 of Mercury's retrogrades going from air signs into earth signs. All of last year, they were all in air signs, and all of next year, they'll all be in earth signs. And so this is one of the borderline years. And so, right, that speaks to different things. That speaks to different things in our charts. It speaks to Mercury moving from the land of ideas, the air signs, into more practical matters in the earth signs. And so wherever they fall in our charts, right, we are going from the theoretical into the practical. And that's what all 3 of Mercury's retrogrades have to do with in 2022. So let's jump in and see what that looks like. Okay. I use non-binary pronouns for Mercury. Other than that, I mean, I stick to the normal pronouns, the traditional pronouns for the other planets, but Mercury seems very obviously non-binary to me. We've got 3 full retrogrades this year. One begins in mid-January into February. This is the shortest one. It lasts about 20 days. So this one gets out of the way as quickly as possible. Very practical Capricorn, always proficient and excellent, making things happen faster. Then we have a second one that goes from Gemini into Taurus. This will happen mid-May into June. So it kind of brings us out of our first eclipse season and into the summer. Then we have our third one from September 9th to October 2nd. This one is the longest one at 24 days. It goes from the beginning of Libra into the end of Virgo. And then finally, we have one that starts on December 29th, so still technically in 2022. That one's going to go into mid-January, and that one happens entirely in Capricorn and starts us off a year of entirely Capricorn journeys. So we'll mention that one briefly, but the main ones that we're going to focus on are Aquarius Capricorn, Gemini Taurus, and Libra Virgo. So how does this matter to you? What should you be paying attention to? So I've used this chart to kind of rank them in significance. And this is all other things being equal, just based on your rising sign, which ones are going to be the most significant or the least significant. So for the fixed rising signs, so that is Aquarius rising, Taurus rising, Leo rising, and Scorpio rising. I think that this first one, the Aquarius to Capricorn, is going to be the most significant one. And then I think the second most significant one is going to be the Gemini to Taurus, and the Libra Virgo, maybe not so much. That is because the Aquarius Capricorn one is going to station in your whole sign angular house. So either houses 1, 4, 7, and 10, and then retrograde back into a cadent house. The Gemini Taurus one is going to station in a succedent house and retrograde into an angular house. And so that is why those are the most significant. The angular houses tend to show us the most obvious kind of like big picture stuff. And then moving into the cadent houses, which are houses 3, 6, 9, and 12, which tend to be, I think, overall just as significant, but not quite as obvious. For the mutable rising signs, so that's going to be Virgo rising, that is going to be Sagittarius rising, Pisces rising, and Gemini rising. I think the second one, the Gemini Taurus one, is going to be the most significant. for the same reason. It stations in an angular house. And then the second most significant one is going to be Libra Virgo, because it's going to retrograde into an angular house. I think the least significant one is going to be Aquarius Capricorn. And then the same thing for the cardinal rising signs. So that's going to be Cancer, Capricorn, Aries, and Libra. The Libra Virgo one will be the most significant, then the Aquarius Capricorn, then the Gemini Taurus. Now, a caveat to all of this: if you have heavy Gemini, if you have heavy Virgo, if you're in a Mercury ruled perfection year, that could throw any of this stuff off. But overall, this is what we're looking at. So let me know where your rising signs are, where your sun and your moon are, and we can keep track of all of this. Oh, and if you have any questions about where you fall in this, feel free to comment and I will respond and let you know. Okay, so jumping right away into the first one. This is our Aquarius Capricorn notable themes, notable dates for this retrograde. This retrograde is really tied into the Venus retrograde that's happening simultaneously, and it's really tied into a series of Mercury, Pluto conjunctions. This is going to be really significant because all three of these retrogrades, what they have in common is aspects to Pluto. This first one definitely hits the hardest because it deals with a conjunction. Mercury makes 3 conjunctions with Pluto, whereas in the other 2, it's going to be 3 trines. So a little bit gentler, a little bit less of bombshell. So we had on December 29th of 2021, Mercury entered the pre-shadow of the retrograde. And then the day after, it made its first conjunction with Pluto at 25 degrees of Capricorn. So that was Mercury entering in, dropping the bombshells, kind of being overwhelmed with information, understanding the severity of the problem, right? We had kind of huge things like the explosion of Omicron and canceling of all of those flights, and like a firebombing of Colorado happened right around there. So, right, some Plutonian vibes definitely happening there. The day after the new year, on the Capricorn new moon, we saw Mercury entering Aquarius, so entering the sign of its retrograde. So part of having these kind of dual sign retrogrades is that we get these pre-shadows. And in Capricorn, you know, Mercury's retrograde could be about one thing depending on which house it falls in your chart. In Aquarius, it could be about another thing. But because those two things are right next to each other, right? How are they connected, right? So I'm an Aquarius rising. Aquarius is my first house. Capricorn is my 12th house, right? Often the things that are going on under the surface in my 12th house are affecting how I'm showing up in my first house. And so, right, this can connect the deeper psychological themes to how I'm showing up just out of what my baseline looks like. And so you can adjust that for your different houses. And if you let me know where they are, I will respond in the comments and help you interpret those. So then we kind of move forward. There's not any kind of huge bombs going off in terms of the Mercury retrograde story. We have Mercury stationing retrograde on January 14th, a Friday, at 10 degrees of Aquarius. Now, I want you to pay attention to this because 10 degrees of Aquarius is really close to the 11 degrees of Aquarius and Taurus, where we had the final Saturn-Uranus square on Christmas Eve. And so anything that was going on around then, how that aspect falls in your chart, could come up again at this Mercury retrograde. We thought we were done. Mercury's going to station, be like, let's look at this. Let's look into more of this. Then we have the Mercury Sun Cazimi at 3 degrees of Aquarius. It's going to be a little bit afterwards. This is the turning point of the retrograde. It's usually the point where we stop kind of fumbling in the dark and making mistakes, and we kind of get it. And we're still kind of stuck in the mess of it, but we're not making things worse. Right? And so if you have any placements at 3 degrees of Aquarius, this is a lot of illumination for them. It can be really powerful. On the 25th, Mercury retrogrades back into Capricorn. Now, this is interesting to me because Mars has also entered Capricorn on the 24th. So Venus has been doing her retrograde thing in Capricorn. She's coming to the end of her retrograde, but just at the very end, she gets joined by Mercury retrograding back in and Mars coming back in. So there's a lot of emphasis in Capricorn. The sun has moved on to Aquarius, but we are pulling everything back into Capricorn. There's still stuff that needs to be revisited in that space. And Mars is going to be the doer. Mars is exalted in Capricorn, so that can really push us to the brink, but also get a lot of stuff done. And Mercury is like, we still need to take care of stuff. Mercury is very practical in Capricorn. So we're going to kind of shore up the buttresses and make sure everything is taken care of. Now on the 28th, Mercury will come into the second conjunction with Pluto. This one happens at 26 degrees of Capricorn. So I think what's interesting about these three conjunctions with Pluto is that they all take place at different degrees. So we had the 24 degree one, then we have the 26 degree one, we had 25 and now we're having 26 and the third one will be at 27 because Pluto is moving along as this is happening. So Mercury conjoins Pluto in the retrograde phase. We kind of understand what a big deal it was, whatever happened on the 29th, whatever was illuminated, we kind of come back to that space. And then Venus is going to station direct on the 29th of January. Mercury follows suit a few days later at 24 degrees of Capricorn. What's significant about this? Well, Venus stationed retrograde at 26 degrees. So they're basically stationing on the same degree. And Pluto is right there with both of them. So, right, what does Pluto have to say about why this is all happening, right? It's these bombshells, it's these secrets, it's these, if we're honest with ourselves, the truth that transforms us. And so Mercury is going to pause for a while and then it's going to start moving forward again. They are going to start moving forward again. They will form their third conjunction with Pluto on February 11th at 27 degrees of Capricorn. Now we see it, it is whatever it is. We communicate the things, we'll either see it collectively, we might feel it personally, especially if you have things in these late degrees of Capricorn. That all kind of comes out. And then on Valentine's Day, happy Valentine's Day, Mercury re-enters Aquarius, or the least romantic sign to celebrate Valentine's Day. Right? It's cold, it's clear. We know what we think. But we're stepping out of kind of the oppressiveness of the way that things have been and the way that they are. And once again, looking towards the future. And then on February 23rd, it's going to leave the post shadow at 10 degrees of Aquarius. And the next day, it's going to square Uranus. So right away, right? So it moved up to 10 degrees of Aquarius, almost squared Uranus, did this whole retrograde story, and now it's coming back and making that square to Uranus. So that insight, that solution, that creative piece that we needed to kind of shore up things in the Capricorn land before we could really, before we were really prepared for the lightning insights of Uranus. So this is, that's the end of the Aquarius Capricorn Mercury retrograde. Okay, my throat is kind of hurting from talking this fast, so apologies for that. Okay, the second retrograde, we have the Gemini Taurus retrograde. Now this one is also going to involve Pluto, but it's also going to be involved with a few other characters. So we get Mercury entering the pre-shadow on April 26th at 26 degrees of Taurus. This pre-shadow is right before we head into eclipse season. And in fact, that's going to happen pretty quickly because we get the Mercury trine to Pluto at 28 degrees of Taurus in Capricorn, Right around there, Pluto is going to station retrograde. So we have Mercury trining Pluto right as Pluto is pausing in the sky, really giving us the downloads of whatever that Pluto station is about. Then on the 29th, Mercury is going to enter Gemini. So, right, entering the second sign, it's still in the pre-shadow. It's still kind of digging up these themes, right? So part of the theme is going to be what exists on the boundary between Gemini and Taurus for you. Which houses is it connecting? How are they connected? Then on May 10th, Mercury is going to station retrograde at 4 degrees of Gemini. At the same time, on the same day, Jupiter goes into Aries. So we're going to see a little bit of Jupiter action, and we get Mercury stationing. We're in the middle of eclipse season. We had the first eclipse on April 30th, and the second eclipse happens on May 15th or 16th, depending on your time zone. And so this is kind of a big shift. This is kind of this like, wait, pause button. We're going to sit here at 4 degrees of Gemini and think about that and start moving backwards. 11 days later, Mercury is going to conjoin the sun in what's called a cazimi at 0 degrees of Gemini. So, right, really emphasizing that borderland. We got 0 degrees of Gemini, where they come together, where we have that insight. It's actually to the arc minute on my IC. So I'm interested to see how that will get activated. The day after, not surprising since the cazimi happened at 0 degrees. The day after, Mercury retrogrades back into Taurus. So we're going back to revisit that part of our charts. So for fixed sign risings, it's moving back into an angular house. Then we have Mercury trining Pluto, the second of 3 of these trines at 28 degrees, really plumbing that transformative space of Pluto, the letting go, the death phase that we see with Pluto on the 25th. And then by the 3rd, Mercury is going to station direct at 26 degrees of Taurus. Now, what's interesting about this station degree is that Saturn will station retrograde at 25 Aquarius the next day. So they're not an exact square, but they're very close. It's almost like Mercury comes up to that harsh boundary, that harsh line with Saturn, and then they kind of sit in the feeling of being stuck, but they don't actually come into that square and duke it out. So is that better? Is that worse? I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. Then a week later, we have the 3rd trine of Mercury with Pluto. And then a few days later, Mercury re-enters Gemini, and by June 18th, it leaves the post-shadow. This one is, I think, the most gentle of the Mercury retrogrades that we get this year. You know, we've got this little play with Saturn, we've got this trine with Pluto, there's a sextile with Jupiter that I didn't even put in here because it seems so gentle. There's a boost coming out of eclipse season. It's just kind of contributing to the eclipse confusion. And so it's really what it's co-occurring with rather than the aspects that it's making that makes it more confusing. Now, this one is probably the most complicated in terms of just the planetary tangles of the whole thing. We're still going to have these trines with Pluto, but there's going to be a few other players. So on August 20th, Mercury enters the pre-shadow. And if you listen to my year ahead forecast, August is just complicated. It's just a hard month because we've got Uranus stationing retrograde on the North Node with Mars, and then everything else moving through Leo squaring them. We've got Saturn opposite Venus. It's a rough month of a lot of squares in the fixed signs. So everyone's digging their heels in, we're having a hard time. And then, right, we kind of head into Mercury retrograde, which on the one hand is like, oh God, now we're in Mercury retrograde. But on the other hand, it's like, when you've got all that tension and you have all that conflict, then of course you need to pause and take a step back and reevaluate the situation, which is what Mercury retrogrades allow us to do. So seems pretty fitting for that. On August 20th, we have Mercury entering the pre-shadow at 24 degrees of Virgo. Mercury opposes Neptune the next day. And I think that this is really interesting because ordinarily, you know, I had to check my calendar, my dates to see if this was a key part of the retrograde, if Mercury was going to oppose Neptune 3 times. It's not, because Neptune is retrograde at this point, and so Neptune moves far enough away that Mercury only makes this opposition once. But still, we're heading into Mercury retrograde with a very kind of nebulous Neptune feel, right? The confusion entering the pre-shadow will be palpable. I think this is a marker for a very complicated Neptunian pre-shadow. Then we have Mercury trine Pluto the day after that. So again, we're coming back to these mercurial Pluto vibes of releasing secrets, of learning the truth about something. On the 25th, Mercury enters Libra. So the second sign of its retrograde. Mercury is going to oppose Jupiter on September 2nd at 6 degrees of Libra and Aries. Jupiter is retrograde at this point, stationed retrograde at 8 degrees of Aries. Mercury opposing Jupiter can have some big messages, right? We've got Mercury that is about reconciliation, and Jupiter at this point in Aries is about, like, how loud can I shout my message? And so there's some conflict, right? It's Jupiter wanting to be really mission driven and Mercury wanting to be very diplomatic. And so there will be questions about how to communicate that happen. Mercury stations retrograde at 8, almost 9. It's like 8:55 degrees of Libra on September 9th. Yeah, I'm laughing at this one because my birthday is September 8th and I switch into a Mercury ruled perfection year. And what is the first thing that happens? My annual perfected planet, my Time Lord, stations retrograde the day after my solar return. Yay, me. And my solar return is a Virgo rising chart. So, okay, we'll see. It'll be fun. Okay. On the 18th, Mercury is going to oppose Jupiter again, this time at 4 degrees of Libra. So we'll kind of see that again, right? You got the message wrong the first time. That's okay. It's better to fail the first time, I think. I do it. All my first times are failures. And then we have the Cazimi right on the fall equinox. Mercury conjoins the sun at 0 Libra. I think that's kind of cool. We've kind of got this like purification process happening right at the fall equinox. We've got this balance point and we get kind of Mercury purified in the heart of the sun through the Cazimi. The next day, Mercury goes back into Virgo and so touches in there. Mercury is going to trine Pluto a few days later. So the second of 3, really processing the way that we communicate, how we think, understanding the significance of our thoughts and our words through all of this Mercury-Pluto contact this year. Then on October 2nd, Mercury is going to station direct at 24 degrees of Virgo, moving right along. Not coming back into another opposition with Neptune because Neptune by this time is at 23 degrees of Virgo, so gets very close, doesn't go back, doesn't complete it. And then we have Mercury trine Pluto for the 3rd time on October 6th at 26 degrees of Virgo and Capricorn, finally kind of integrating what was there, pushing on us for transformation. Then we have Mercury re-enter Libra on October 10th. Mercury forms its 3 out of 3, its 3rd opposition with Jupiter at 1 degree of Libra on the 12th, finally figuring out how to wed the impassioned nature of our message with our communication in Libra. And then finally, Mercury is going to leave the post shadow of its retrograde at 8 degrees of Libra on October 16th. And that is our third and final complete Mercury retrograde for 2022. But we get the beginning of another one. So the Capricorn one, we have Mercury entering the pre-shadow on December 12th at 8 degrees of Capricorn. Mercury is going to square Chiron. And so really the story of this retrograde is 3 squares to Chiron. I cannot speak. Mercury's in its pre-shadow right now, and I am talking way faster than I should be for that. So there's going to be 3 squares to Chiron. Painful, medicine, communication. So speak the truth. It's probably going to hurt. It's probably going to heal you when you can absorb it. And then Mercury is going to trine Uranus also 3 times. So these kind of insights, right? About how how the poison is its own antidote. And that we get the first one of that on December 17th. And then on December 29th, Mercury is going to station retrograde at 24 degrees of Capricorn, also with Venus, right? This is very, very close to, well, this is Mercury's station degree. It's very close to Venus's station degree. We kind of end this year as we began it, with Mercury and Venus in the same position in Capricorn coming back. So that just pushes us forward to do the best we can, because, right, the truth of cycles is that we never truly leave anything behind. Okay, I hope this video is helpful. I hope that I gave you some insights about the themes that you might be encountering and what to look out for in the year ahead. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and share it with anyone else who you think might enjoy it. And I will record these again piece by piece for each Mercury retrograde as we move through 2022.